Well, our general topic today, our topics today are going to be focused on my sense of breaking through some common myths that our anatomy books and our kinesiology books and the vision of the relationship of the body and the mind and how the mind and the body are engaged in movement and development of movement, development of all of our cognitive, emotional skills. I've looked at all those textbooks for years, and there are some glaring absences that I find in my own practice and my own studio laboratory. So a lot of that and those misconceptions are anatomical and kinesiological, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I also find,
by the way, your screen, you're not sharing your screen yet.
Oh, I'm not. Oh, God. We don't want that.
Yep.
All right. Fantastic. There we are.
It's slowly getting there. Yep.
Now I see this column of tiles. I may have to manipulate a little bit if it's blocking something on the screen.
I think it's good for us. Good for everyone else?
Let's see, I can just bring this down to me so I can open up the screen a little bit. I can bring it back to tiles. All right, okay. Okay, everybody on the screen.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, great. The other glaring absence I find in textbooks, which I have dug long and hard trying to find information about, is an understanding and any meaningful descriptions of this, one of the topics we're going to be spending a lot of time on today, which is the gamma motor system. Usually I say gamma motor system and I just draw a blank. Nobody's heard of it. But this system of the vast realm of unconscious control of our movements and our postures and the unconscious elements in our consciousness that are linked to our muscular competence are just absent. So a lot of the information that I'm giving out, I find images in the textbooks I find useful to speak to, but has been a lot of what I'll be talking about are not in the textbooks. It's the fruit of my 40 years of just playing with thousands of bodies and observing resistances, change of resistance, how to free up old habits, how to establish new habits. So yes, indeedy. I'm so happy to share those years of experience and some insight into what's missing from the normal vision of how this critter ticks that is out there. Now, one of the things I find in our anatomy books is that there's a tidy cleaning up that's going on. So when they're showing us a picture of muscles, they've vacuumed out a lot of the relevant tissues so we can see the pretty red muscle bodies and the white tendons, and everything looks very separate and operating in its own domain. So almost all of the connective tissue that transfers movement from the muscles has been eliminated in these anatomy textbooks. The extensive and intermeshed webbing of the connective tissue has largely been eliminated. I would say by something over 90% is absent in the textbooks, because this connective tissue medium, which we're going to talk about in our next webinar, is coextensive throughout the entire system. It's not just ligaments and tendons. And it ties everything together. So there's no movement I can make that is not affecting a wide domain of muscles that are all connected together in synergistic groups. And this gives a very false impression about movement transfer from my nervous system happening at origins and insertions of muscles. And this gives us a very robotic view of how our system is designed to move. Hinges, pulleys, cables, and it just isn't put together that way. So here's an example. I want to look at little examples of as we get started. Here's a picture from an anatomy book, and this is a very fine anatomy book. And you can see how all the muscles are isolated. We can see them as they are individual entities. And this is what we get when we look at most anatomy books. If I look at that same neck, including all this webbing that I've been talking about, we see it looks much more like this. And you can see all those muscular structures, the trachea, base of the tongue. This is the sternocleidomastoid that's been deflected so we can see a little more clearly into the neck. Here is upper fibers of the trapezius. You can see that this much more extensive meshing of connective tissue is tying this picture, which gives us individual muscles, into one synergistic, mutually connected domain of muscle, fascia, and how movement is organized. Here's just another quick example. We take this is one of my favorite anatomy books. It's highly detailed, the pictures are beautiful, but we take a look at the hand, and again, we see tendons, we see muscles, we see a ligament, all in their own separate structures. But we take a little bit more realistic look at the inclusion of the fascia that ties everything together, and it's a very different hand. You can see that when I exercise the muscle that pulls, contract the muscle that pulls on these tendons, it doesn't only just straighten out my fingers, but through the interwebbing, meshing between these tendons and the connective tissue that connects them into a single unit, and the ligament structure, and the fascia of my lower arm as it goes on up out of the picture here. This is all one synergistic group of, yes, tendons, muscles, and ligaments, but a much more extensive, much finer, and much more ubiquitous webbing that ties all of these apparent separate structures into a very unified, global, full body mesh that my mind and my muscular responses are shape changing this way and that. And we're not robots. We're more like amoebas. We're shape changers. We flow into a new shape, hold that shape, we flow into another shape. And this doesn't just happen by robotic tendons, muscles, insertions. Let me see here, let me contain this down a little bit. Yes, there we go. I don't want to block the screen with my tiles. Now, moving on to kinesiology textbooks from the anatomy textbooks, typical illustrations of kinesiological functions isolate single muscles and greatly oversimplify those muscles' roles in organized movement. In your typical kinesiological textbook's illustration, there is no sense of this extensive and synergistic movement of muscle fibers during any actual movement. They're describing what one muscle does, but there's no sense of how that muscle is cooperating with many muscles to actually achieve what that one muscle does. This gives us, again, a very robotic image of the nature of our structure and movement. We're not made up of discrete cables and hinges. We are shape changers, not robots. Here's a typical illustration from a kinesiological textbook. And we can see what has been isolated here is the Latissimus Dorsi. one of the main muscles that ties our spine over to our arm. Now,